3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files.
That's good to be back.
Donald Trump. Epstein recruited from Mar-a-Lago. There's a quote from 2002.
A very disturbing quote.
Today we examine the Trump connection, what's documented, the statements made, and where the record ends.
And this is probably the connection that has fueled, 1,000 headlines and likely just as many lawsuits. But you're right to frame it that way.
How so?
Well, we aren't here to rehash cable news arguments. We're certainly not here to get involved in the politics of, an election cycle.
No, absolutely not.
We're here to do what we always do. We open the box, put on the gloves, and we handle the raw evidence.
And the mission for this deep dive it's very specific. We are looking at the intersection of a future president in the United States and a prolific sex trafficker.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't just looking at the fact that they were in the same social circles. That's old news. We've all seen the photos of them partying in the 90s.
Sure, that's public record.
We are looking at the specific documented interactions that took place behind the Gilded Gates of Palm Beach.
And we have to set aside the noise. There is so much political static around this topic. Depending on which channel you watch, this relationship is either the defining scandal of the era or
a complete nothing burger, a casual acquaintance that meant nothing.
Exactly. And the truth, as it usually does, it lies in the paperwork. It's in the scribbled margins of notebooks and the very dry text of FBI summaries.
So here is our roadmap for this session. We're going to examine the recruitment of staff for Mar-a-Lago, how Epstein used the club not just as a watering hole, but as a hunting ground.
It's a strong term, but the documents support it.
We're also going to look at the specific introductions made to Donald Trump by Jeffrey Epstein, including a very, very disturbing incident involving a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, that one's tough to get through.
And then we'll unpack the financial surveillance Epstein seemed to be conducting on Trump's business empire. This is a part of the story that rarely gets told.
It's fascinating. We found these detailed notes on mortgages, revenue, even debts.
Yeah.
It suggests a relationship that was transactional in a really complex way.
And finally, we'll look at how their names were, inextricably linked in the deposition of Ghislaine Maxwell.
When she was fighting for her life, legally speaking.
It's a lot to get through, and I'll be honest with you, and with everyone listening, some of this is frankly pretty dark, it's uncomfortable.
It is.
But it's necessary if we want to understand the machinery of how Epstein operated. So let's just dive right in. I want to start with the geography, the location. Mar-a-Lago.
The setting is absolutely crucial. To understand the relationship, you have to understand Palm Beach in the 1990s and, the early 2000s.
Okay.
Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a private residence then. It was the center of gravity for a certain type of society. It was new money, it was flash, it was exclusive.
Right.
And for Jeffrey Epstein, it wasn't just a place to be seen sipping a cocktail. The DOJ files suggest it was an operational node.
An operational node? That sounds almost military, but we're talking about a social club.
We are. But look at the file regarding the towel girl.
The towel girl.
Yeah. This is a document buried deep in the investigative stack, but it tells us everything about Epstein's modus operandi. It describes a specific recruitment incident.
At Mar-a-Lago.
At Mar-a-Lago. It refers to a young woman working at the spa, colloquially called a towel girl.
Okay, let's pause there and paint the picture.
Yeah.
You have a young woman, probably on a service wage, working in the spa of one of the most expensive clubs in America.
Right.
Her job is to hand out towels, keep the place tidy. She's background scenery to these people. And then in walks Jeffrey Epstein.
Exactly. And the file is explicit. It doesn't say he flirted with her. It doesn't say he asked for her number. The file implies he extracted her. Epstein utilized his access to the club, his status as a wealthy member, a VIP who probably tipped well and, knew the owner to scout for victims. He identified her there in that quote-unquote safe space of her workplace, and he targeted her.
And when the file says targeted, we need to be clear for everyone listening. We are not talking about asking her out on a date.
Oh, no.
We're talking about recruiting her for what he called massage work.
Which we now know definitively was the euphemism. It was the front for his trafficking operation.
Right. The massage euphemism.
But think about the power dynamic there. This is what chills me about this specific document. You have a service worker, someone who is basically invisible to most of the clientele, and then you have a billionaire member taking this sudden, intense interest in her career.
It's the classic predator playbook, isn't it? Isolate and then overwhelm them with what looks like an opportunity.
A life-changing opportunity.
But what strikes me about this file, what really stands out, is that it happened at Mar-a-Lago. It suggests that the staff there were, well, they were treated as a resource pool for him.
That's a good way to put it.
Which brings up the question, did the management know? Did Trump know this was happening?
The files don't give us a smoking gun on management awareness in that specific instance. There's no email saying, hey, let Epstein recruit from the spa. But there's another document, and it makes the dynamic even murkier. It details an interaction where friends suggested a girl was still a certain age.
Still?
Yes, still. And a context in the document references a 14-year-old boy. And it goes on to mention Trump asking her to serve in some capacity.
Serve. That's a loaded word.
It's very loaded.
Let's unpack that. Because on one hand, if you own a club, you ask staff to serve drinks, to serve food. That's the job.
Right. And I want to be really careful here not to overinterpret. On the surface, asking a girl to serve could be a completely mundane request. Please serve these hors d'oeuvres.
Of course.
But we have to look at the context of the investigative file. This note was preserved by investigators who were looking into sex trafficking. It wasn't in a file about club management.
So the fact that it's in the file at all suggests the investigators thought it was significant.
Precisely. It implies that the lines between legitimate employment at the club and the grooming patterns we see everywhere else in this case, they were blurred. If the girl was underage, or if the service implied something beyond carrying a tray, then we are looking at something very, very different.
It establishes Mar-a-Lago not just as a backdrop, like a restaurant where they happen to eat,
Right.
but as a place where the hierarchy of server and served was manipulated. It was an operational node.
That's the term. It brings up the whole issue of access.
Yeah.
Epstein had the run of the place. We know from so many other accounts that he was a fixture there. But seeing it in black and white in a DOJ file, that he was plucking girls from the spa, it makes it very real.
It wasn't just that they were friends. It was that Epstein was treating Trump's club like his own personal hunting reserve.
It creates a geography of the crimes. These weren't just crimes of opportunity, they were crimes of location.
Yeah.
Epstein went where the targets were. And for time, that was Mar-a-Lago. He felt comfortable there. He felt safe.
Which leads us to the question of why he felt so safe. And I think the answer might lie in the next document we need to discuss.
I know which one you mean.
This is arguably the most visceral piece of evidence in the entire stack. It's a document that describes a direct physical interaction between Epstein and Trump regarding a minor.
You're talking about the elbow incident.
I am. I want you to walk us through this document because when I first read it, I literally had to put the paper down for a second. It's so casual.
It is the banality of it that is so terrifying. The file describes an introduction. It's simple. Epstein is introducing a girl, referred to in the papers as 14-year-old Doe, to Donald J. Trump.
Okay.
And the investigator writing this up notes a specific physical action. It says, Epstein elbowed Trump playfully.
Let's stop right there. A playful elbow. Just visualize that body language for a moment.
It's a gesture of camaraderie. It's a nudge, nudge, wink, wink moment. It's something you do to a buddy at a bar when an attractive person walks in.
Right. Or when you're sharing a private joke.
Exactly. It implies a level of intimacy and shared understanding that goes way beyond a formal business relationship. You don't playfully elbow a casual acquaintance.
No.
You don't elbow someone you respect as a distant superior. You elbow a co-conspirator.
A co-conspirator. And the quote that accompanies the elbow, it's just awful.
It's sickening.
Epstein says to Trump, referring to this 14-year-old girl, this is a good one.
This is a good one. I mean, it's just gut-wrenching. It is the language of commodification in its purest, most brutal form.
He isn't introducing a human being.
No.
He isn't saying, Donald, this is Sarah. She's a bright student. She's interested in architecture.
No. He is introducing a product. He is validating the quality of the victim, like he's pointing out a racehorse or a vintage car. Check out the lines on this one. It's grotesque.
But he's saying it to Trump. What does that say about their dynamic? I mean, if someone elbowed me and said that about a child, I'd like to think I would recoil. I'd call the police. I'd throw them out of my house.
That is the absolute critical question, isn't it? The file records the action and the comment by Epstein. It doesn't explicitly record Trump's verbal response in that exact split second. We don't have a transcript of him saying, yes, she is.
Okay.
But the context, the implication, is that Epstein felt comfortable enough to say it. He didn't fear a reprimand.
Yeah.
He didn't fear being banned from the club.
He expected, at the very least, a complicit silence.
Yes. He expected Trump to get the joke, whatever that horrific joke was.
And this seems like part of a larger pattern. There's another document in the stack, a different one, that mentions a claim that Epstein showed her off to Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, the show-off pattern.
Yeah.
This is a recurring theme in the Epstein psychology.
Okay.
It's fundamental to understanding him. We see it with other powerful men, too, scientists, politicians. He collected people.
He collected powerful men, and he collected victims.
And he used one to impress the other. It was a symbiotic relationship in his mind.
So in this scenario, showing off a victim to Trump is a way of demonstrating his own power. Like, look what I have. Look what I can get.
Precisely. By showing Trump, who was, let's face it, the king of Palm Beach at that time, the owner of the club, a symbol of ultimate virility and wealth in that era, by showing him a good one, Epstein is asserting his own status. He's saying, I am a provider. I have access to things even you might want. It's a power play.
It also validates the victim in his twisted mind, doesn't it? If the big boss approves or even just looks, then the victim is high value. It's sick.
It is sick, and it implicates the observer. This is the trap Epstein set for everyone in his orbit. Even if Trump didn't take that specific girl, the act of being the audience for that introduction draws him into the circle.
It normalizes it.
It completely normalizes the presence of these young girls in that environment. It makes the abnormal seem standard. Because if the owner of the club doesn't blink when you introduce a 14-year-old as a good one, then the rules of the outside world, they don't apply here. It's a different place with different rules.
It's that normalization that is so dangerous. Because if the future president is okay with it, or at least appears to be okay with it, then who is the staff member who's going to speak up?
Who's going to risk their job?
Who is the towel girl who's going to complain?
Exactly. That was the shield Epstein operated behind for decades. The shield of association. If you are standing next to the most powerful man in the room, you become untouchable.
Speaking of association, let's pivot for a moment. We often talk about the predatory aspect, the social aspect, the parties, the girls. But these files reveal another layer to this onion.
They do.
Epstein wasn't just a social predator. He was, it seems, obsessed with Trump's finances.
This was a fascinating find in the stack, and one that I think explains a lot about the durability of their relationship, whatever it was.
How so?
We tend to think of Epstein as a social climber, but first and foremost, he was a financial creature. And the files contain both handwritten notes and typed documents where Epstein is tracking Donald Trump's business dealings with, obsessive detail.
I have the list here, and it reads like a forensic audit. He's not just jotting down Donald is rich. He's tracking the Trump shuttle.
Yes.
He's tracking Hawaiian tropic contests.
Which, again, circles back to the beauty pageant connection. Another hunting ground for both of them, it seems. But look at the granular detail. It's not just the big brand names.
Right. Mortgage on Mar-a-Lago. Revenue of golf courses as income. Why on earth is Jeffrey Epstein writing down the mortgage details of his neighbor? That's not normal friendship behavior. I don't know my best friend's mortgage rate.
No, you don't, but you aren't a financial predator. And look, there are two ways to look at this. The first is that Epstein was a financial fixer. Remember his whole story. He worked for Les Wexner. He prided himself on understanding the complex debt structures of billionaires.
Okay.
And in the early 90s, Trump was in trouble. He was famously over-leveraged.
Right, the casinos, the airline, the famous quote about being worth more dead than alive. He was legally rich but cash poor.
Exactly. So Epstein may have been looking for an opening, a way to make himself indispensable. If he knew the mortgage terms, he knew when the balloon payments were due, he knew when Trump would be desperate, he could swoop in and say, I can help with this. I can fix this.
So it was a way to buy influence, to get closer to the center of power.
Or control. That's the second interpretation. This was intelligence gathering. We know Epstein collected blackmail material compromat, and it wasn't just sexual, it was financial. Knowing exactly how leveraged a powerful man is gives you immense leverage over him. If you know he's lying to the banks about his golf course revenue, for example, that's a weapon.
If you know the mortgage is due and the revenue is down, you know where the pressure points are. You know when to squeeze.
Correct. Knowledge is power, and Epstein was a hoarder of power. He tracked the assets and the liabilities of the extraordinary people in his orbit. He treated them all like chess pieces on a board.
There is a specific note that really It almost humanizes this weird dynamic, or at least makes it feel very grounded in that specific era. It's a handwritten scrawl.
I know the one.
Where Epstein writes, "Found myself as broke as I was. Donald Trump recently bought our," and then the sentence just trails off.
Found myself as broke as I was. That is a rare, rare moment of vulnerability in the Epstein papers. He almost never admits weakness. It likely refers to the turbulent financial periods both men faced in the 90s.
It humanizes the transaction. Two men navigating high-stakes finance, with Epstein keeping this secret ledger on Trump's solvency while simultaneously worrying about his own.
Yeah, it paints a picture of two hustlers, doesn't it?
Right.
Two guys in suits in Palm Beach trying to keep the facade up.
That's a very astute observation. They were both selling a brand of infinite wealth. For Epstein, it was the mysterious money manager who never lost. For Trump, it was the real estate tycoon with the gold-plated everything.
But behind the scenes, one is scribbling notes about mortgages and the other is leveraged to the hilt, and Epstein feels broke. It suggests a deeply transactional nature to their friendship. They were useful to each other.
Until they weren't.
Until they weren't. But even when the friendship reportedly cooled, and we'll get to the whole "I barely knew him" stuff later, the web remained. We see another document later in the timeline, one that references the Secret Service.
Yes, the cost of protection. It says $5.6 million. Now, let's be clear. Obviously, Secret Service protection costs money. That is not a crime. It's not a scandal.
No, of course not. It's a standard government expense. Presidents need protection. End of story.
But finding this document in the Epstein files, in the DOJ cache from this investigation, is symbolic, isn't it?
It's incredibly symbolic. Think about the timeline. We started this conversation with Epstein recruiting towel girls at a beach club.
Right.
We end with that same club being designated the Winter White House, surrounded by a security apparatus costing millions of dollars.
It's a jarring contrast. The place of the alleged crimes becomes the seat of global power.
And it raises the question, did the Secret Service know? When they were vetting the club, securing the perimeter, putting snipers on the roof, were they aware of the history contained in these files we're discussing?
The document itself doesn't say, but its presence in the investigation file suggests the FBI was drawing that very connection. They were looking at the transformation of the venue from a social club to a fortress.
It's a key part of the story.
Let's move to the legal defense. Because when the heat finally came down, not on Epstein, who was dead by then, but on Ghislaine Maxwell, Donald Trump's name came up again. But this time, it wasn't about finances or introductions. It was used as a shield.
This comes from the Maxwell depositions and the interview transcripts. This is Ghislaine Maxwell fighting for her life, essentially. She's being grilled by attorneys day after day.
And her strategy is fascinating.
It is. She tries to normalize the chaos. She tries to normalize the abuse by invoking the names of the famous people they surrounded themselves with.
We have a key quote here from the transcript. Maxwell compares her interactions with Epstein to interacting with, quote, "extraordinary people like you do with President Trump."
Extraordinary people. That phrase does so much heavy lifting for her defense.
What do you mean?
She puts Epstein and Trump in the same bucket. In her mind, and more importantly in the defense she was constructing, these men operate above the rules. They are different from you and me. They are eccentric. They are demanding. They have entourages.
So she's saying it wasn't a criminal enterprise. It was just how billionaires live.
Exactly. She's trying to gaslight the investigators and, by extension, the jury. She mentions Trump. She mentions P. Diddy. She mentions the Clintons. The argument is, look, everyone was there. Presidents, princes, moguls. If this was some sordid criminal ring, why are all these respectable people hanging out with us?
It's the safety in numbers defense.
It's the safety in famous numbers defense. By invoking Trump's name, and she specifically emphasizes President Trump, she is trying to cloak Epstein in the legitimacy of the office of the presidency itself. She's implying that you can't indict the lifestyle without indicting the entire American elite structure. It's a bold move.
And looking at the files, specifically that list of names we see, Trump alongside princes and other politicians, it does show how embedded they were.
It proves that Epstein's camouflage was effective. For decades, he hid in plain sight. And Trump, whether he knew the full details of the trafficking or not, was a part of that camouflage.
His presence at the parties, his membership at the club.
It all added to the veneer of respectability that Epstein desperately needed to operate. You don't question the guy who is partying with the famous real estate mogul. It lends credibility.
So we have the files from the 90s and early 2000s, the recruitment, the finances, the elbow. But then we fast forward to 2019, Epstein is arrested, the story explodes, and suddenly, it seems, everyone has amnesia.
The summer of 2019 was a masterclass in distancing. As soon as the cuffs went on Epstein, the Rolodexes snapped shut all over New York, Palm Beach, and, everywhere else.
We reviewed some of the media coverage from the Time sources that were tracking the story daily. The atmosphere was just frantic.
It was hysteria. You had the release of the Maxwell files, the unsealed documents, and suddenly names like Trump and Clinton were trending on Twitter every single hour.
The political polarization was just, it was white hot.
Oh, it was intense. Everyone wanted their political opponent to be the villain of this story.
One side was screaming, Trump is a co-conspirator. The other side was screaming, it was Clinton. Look at the flight logs.
And in the middle of this media storm, you had the actual statements from the men involved. Donald Trump, who we know from the files had been playfully elbowed by Epstein and had his financial life tracked by him, came out and said he barely knew the guy.
He said he hadn't spoken to him in years. He called him not a fan.
I was not a fan of his.
The disconnect is striking, isn't it? You look at that elbow document, that intimacy, that shared unspoken joke, and then you hear the 2019 statement, I wasn't a fan. It feels rehearsed.
It's a protective crouch. And to be fair, almost everyone in that circle did the exact same thing. No one came out and said, yes, Jeffrey was a dear friend of mine. This is shocking.
No.
But the files we are looking at today, the DOJ files, they don't care about the 2019 PR strategy. They record the reality of the relationship when it was active.
And there's one document from the files that suggests the investigators were getting real-time information that contradicted that public distance. The Harani document.
Yes. The file note is something like, Florida man drops a dime on Trump.
Florida man? Who is this Florida man? Because that usually implies someone doing something crazy with an alligator, but here it seems quite serious.
This is a reference to George Harani. And he wasn't just some random guy. He was a Florida businessman who ran the American Dream beauty pageants.
So he was in the industry. He was part of that world.
He was in the room. He was organizing the very events where Trump and Epstein were, let's say, scouting. He knew the scene intimately.
And the file says he dropped a dime. That's an old phrase for being an informant. He went to the New York Times.
He did. And the DOJ file captures this. Harani told the Times about the president's relationship with, quote, 28 girls. He gave specific details about parties.
28 girls. That's a very specific number. It's not dozens or a lot. It's 28.
It is specific. And specificity usually implies memory. The fact that this document exists in the DOJ investigative file suggests that the FBI and prosecutors were taking these tips very seriously.
They were actively collecting evidence that challenged the I barely knew him narrative.
Absolutely. They were looking at the depth of the social entanglement, not just the public statements.
It's interesting that the file uses that phrase, drops a dime. It sounds so old school noir, but it implies a betrayal. Harani was part of that world, and he broke the code of silence.
And that's what this entire deep dive is about, really. It's about breaking that code of silence. For years, what happened at Mar-a-Lago and on the island was protected by NDAs, by fear, and by the sheer power of the people involved. These documents are the cracks in that wall.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've looked at a lot of paper today. We've parsed legal language and handwritten notes. When you put it all together, what is the picture that emerges?
If we strip away the politics, and we have to, if we forget who is running for office, forget the partisan bickering, and just look at the documents, a clear narrative forms.
And what is that narrative?
It is a narrative of proximity and utility.
Okay, let's break it down by the facts that we've established from the files. Fact 1, Mar-a-Lago was a recruitment venue.
The document on the towel girl confirms that. It wasn't just a club. It was a pool of potential victims for him. Epstein used his access to staff to find girls. That is documented.
Fact 2, the introductions.
The elbow incident. Epstein introduced minors to Trump. He used the phrase, this is a good one. He used physical familiarity, the elbow, to cement the bond. That happened. An investigator wrote it down.
Fact 3, the surveillance.
Epstein kept detailed, obsessive notes on Trump's debts, assets, and business moves. He was watching him closely. He was tracking the money. That's in the files.
And fact 4, the defense.
The Maxwell transcripts. The key defense of the Epstein enterprise, in her own words, was that they were surrounded by extraordinary people like the president. Trump was the ultimate character witness, whether he wanted to be or not.
It's a heavy stack of evidence. And it leaves us with a very different understanding than the one we get from the 30-second sound bites on the news.
That's the value of going to the source. The reality is usually messier, darker, and frankly, more human than the headline. It's not a cartoon villain story. It's a story about power, access, and the commodification of human beings.
I keep going back to that elbow. It's such a small detail, a nudge. But in a way, it says more than 1,000 pages of legal text could ever say.
It does. Think about when you elbow someone. It's conspiratorial. It says, you and I, we see the world the same way. It says, we are in on the joke.
And when the joke is the exploitation of a child,
then the conspiracy is a tragedy. It implies a conspiracy of silence, a shared understanding that human beings can be bought, sold, and shown off like property. And that specific piece of body language, recorded by an investigator years ago, tells us that at that moment in time, behind those gilded gates, that was the accepted reality.
And that is a chilling thought to end on. But it is what the documents show.
It is.
We've established the geography of the recruitment at Mar-a-Lago. We've documented the introductions. We've looked at the financial surveillance Epstein conducted on his famous neighbor. But the web goes much further than Palm Beach.
Oh, it certainly does. Next time, we are crossing the Atlantic.
Next time, British royalty, Prince Andrew, the photograph, Virginia Giuffre's allegations, the settlement. That's next time on the Epstein Files.
Looking forward to it.
That's next time on the Epstein Files.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.